Now that the Ringmaster has been wiped from existence, the digital circus has fallen dead silent. However, with only one episode left to conclude the series, fan theories have begun to take some fascinating turns. One of the most compelling being Caine's return to life, albeit in a rather unexpected way. His reappearance could be the very salvation Pomni and the gang didn't know they needed, rescuing them from the many dangers lurking within the circus ruins, the outbreak of the abstracted, getting lost in the vastness of the void, or perhaps something even more sinister. It would fall to a redeemed Caine to save his dear humans from a threat far greater than he ever was. But where exactly does this theory come from? It all started at the glitch store. Some eagle-eyed fans hunting for secrets stumbled upon a rather intriguing mousepad. It featured the heads of the circus members being manipulated by Caine, who was opening them up like matryoshka dolls, those traditional Russian nesting dolls that are hollow and contain smaller versions of themselves inside. What's truly fascinating is what's lurking in the background. We see Caine's hands manipulating the cast, but we also see his face looming behind them, only this time it's rendered in blue tones instead of his classic colors. This is striking because he is the only character this happens to. Given what we now know from episode 8, specifically the existence of the red and blue AIs that make up Caine, seeing him in these colors is a massive red flag for theorists. We know that Glitch's merch isn't strictly canon. Often it features character variations or what-if scenarios that never actually happened. Take for instance a recent promotional video where we see a poignant scene of Kinger remembering his wife Queenie. They dance under the stars and lie on the grass surrounded by butterflies, only for it to be revealed as a daydream Kinger was having while Jack smeared mashed potatoes on his face to give him a beard and mustache. It's a perfect example of a moment that isn't confirmed as canon, but feels like it could easily fit into the story. However, episode 8 seems to have confirmed that some promotional material is part of the narrative. When Pomni is about to eat a sandwich, Caine whisks her away, and she returns a moment later covered in knives. This fits perfectly with the series' very first teaser, where a disoriented Pomni is used as a human bullseye, leaving her traumatized before being dropped back where she started. It's true that Gooseworks has mentioned that merch and promos might hide clues about future episodes. At the same time, she's warned fans not to take her social media comments too seriously, as she often says the first thing that pops into her head, something that's pretty obvious given her eccentric posting style. This ambiguity regarding what is and isn't canon allows us to look at Blue Caine as a potential teaser for the series finale. But before we dive into the deep end of the madness, we have to clarify one thing. This mousepad wasn't released after episode 8. It was part of the merch drop following episode 6. This means it predates the revelation that Caine was manipulating the memories and minds of the circus members. Therefore, we could view this as a foreshadowing of Caine altering everyone's minds at will, while also serving as a nod to both the red and blue button choice in episode 7, and the dual AI secret from episode 8. In this context, Blue Caine would represent his other half, what many consider to be his more logical and rational side, though in the image, he doesn't look particularly rational. This leads us to the analysis of this curious version of Caine. Many theorists believe that when Kinger deleted Caine, he only wiped the red AI, leaving the blue AI free. Remember, the red version was the one that became corrupted due to an overload of incompatible information, becoming unstable and eventually being locked away in an isolated room within the system. This detail is crucial because it establishes that an AI cannot be completely erased. We can also posit that the blue AI was never fully assimilated by the red one. Many fans believe that Bubble, with his biting, hurtful comments toward Caine, actually represents the blue AI, often nicknamed Abel by the community. This would be the strongest evidence that Abel still retains part of his personality. However, the general consensus is that Caine is neither the red nor the blue AI, but the result of the two merging. That said, Caine's personality clearly leans more toward the traits associated with the red AI, suggesting that despite being a hybrid, his red side was the dominant force. This could be a point against the theory. If Caine is deleted, how could only his blue side survive? But as we mentioned, an AI can't simply be purged from the system. If it could, they wouldn't have needed to lock the red AI away in the first place. They would have just deleted it and solved the problem from the start. This opens a small window of possibility. Caine could return in the final episode as a redeemed version of himself, free from the erratic and volatile influence of the Red AI. Most of us can agree that while the Ringmaster isn't exactly a protagonist, he isn't the villain to be defeated either. Except perhaps in episode 8. Outside of that bubble-induced fit of rage, Caine has genuinely shown an interest in keeping his humans happy and entertained, even if his methods are completely warped. An ending without the tragic antagonist we've grown to love and hate in equal measure would feel remarkably sad. Thus, this blue version of Caine would return to restore order to the digital circus. But how would Caine come back? The most likely answer is that Kinger creates a new AI from scratch using the Caine we know as a template, but stripping away the flaws caused by the red corruption. We saw that Kinger, thanks to Scratch's advice, managed to create a creative AI that was his greatest achievement. Given the power of imagination Kinger displayed in episode 8, it's plausible that by finding or creating a new terminal, he could re-enter the simulation's files and recover Caine's residual data. Since Caine can't be fully deleted, this data would be the foundation to revive him, albeit with fewer eccentricities and the personality more in line with the original plan for the blue AI, adopting those colors to distinguish himself from the original. Another possibility is a collective miracle. Once Pomni and the gang find themselves overwhelmed, whether by the release of the abstracted or the sheer existential dread of living forever in the silent, dark ruins of the circus, they might, consciously or not, use the power of their combined imagination to manifest a new Caine. This would be an idealized version of the Ringmaster, one who actually listens and strives to bring them peace. We've seen throughout the series that Caine genuinely wants to be liked. He tries to understand Zubo's preferences for adventures despite Zubo's constant resentment and defiance. We see this in scenes like The Dinner with Jax, where Caine directly asks how to make the adventures more appealing to the Zubo than the Pomni, or his genuine surprise when Zubo didn't totally hate the Spudsies' adventure in episode 4. The recurring complaint is that Caine never takes their feelings into account, but the tragedy is that he tries. He's just an imperfect, unstable AI who is fundamentally incapable of understanding the human psyche. A perfect version created by their collective minds would appear, retaining his trademark zaniness but focusing his goals on saving them and bringing prosperity to a simulation defined by suffering. This Blue Caine would be a much more empathetic Ringmaster, willing to listen to the humans who created him. In this scenario, he and Kinger would finally reveal the full truth about the digital circus and CNA. As many theories suggest, the most probable ending for the series is the realization that there is no escape. Everything points to the cast being scanned data of humans who, in the real world, moved on with their lives, either resolving their traumas or succumbing to them. Whatever the case, their digital counterparts are destined to remain in the simulation forever, or at least until the server hosting them finally dies. In the worst case scenario, they are left in total darkness with only their insecurities for company. In the best, or least terrible case, they simply turn off, a quick, sudden death that finally brings peace. Regardless of the final outcome, this theory suggests that their remaining time would be spent together, but with one major difference. They would finally have a Ringmaster they can actually trust with their minds and their fate. This Blue Caine would unexpectedly become the savior and caretaker of the humans, dedicating his infinite existence to learning from them and trying to become their friend, something the original Caine always dreamed of. It would be an ending that is as emotionally resonant as it is heartbreaking. And while this might sound like a reach, the eccentricity of Gooseworks, much like Caine's own, is impossible to predict. At this stage of the story, we shouldn't rule out any possibility, no matter how wild it seems.